Happy Chinese New Year, the year of the ox, and welcome to the 5 New Year's Wellness Challenge with your host, Dr. Sarah D. Alemi. We are celebrating the Chinese New Year with the 5 elements of acupuncture: metal, water, wood, fire, and earth. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Dr. Sarah D. Alemi.
Good evening. For those of you who are with me on Friday the 12th, welcome back. And for those of you who are just joining me, welcome. I'm Dr. Sarah Alemi, and today we are kicking off our 5-element wellness challenge. What does that mean? Well, every day this week, we are going to be talking about one of the 5 elements of acupuncture theory. And all you have to do for the challenge, register and show up. And you're going to learn a lot of information, not only about your health, but about the Chinese New Year as well. A quick recap, though. On Friday, February 12th, we kicked off or started the Chinese New Year, which is a 15-day celebration. So it is most certainly still going on and still going strong. We also started to bring up the philosophy of 5-element theory. This theory is the basis for both the Chinese zodiac as well as 5-element acupuncture. And while the Chinese zodiac will use your birth year to dictate your constitutional factor or your element, whether it is the metal, the water, the wood, the fire, or the earth, acupuncture is rooted a little bit more in scientific theory, thankfully, and doesn't necessarily use your birth year to dictate what element you are. Not that the Chinese zodiac or Western astrology aren't fun to play with every now and then. Now, 5-element theory, some of you might remember, is used to describe the 5 basic processes of nature, the 5 qualities of natural phenomena, the 5 phases of a cycle, and the 5 inherent capabilities of change of phenomena. The theory of Wuxing, as 5-element is also called, is that all of life is a constant cycle through the 5 different phases of the elements. So the metal, the water, the wood, the fire, and the earth. Everything in the universe, down to the tiniest molecule, is made up of these 5 elements and relies on the continual flow of them. As I noted last time, think of nature as the different seasons. Nature continually cycles through the seasons. We cannot have spring without winter. We cannot have winter without fall. In terms of medicine and your health, the applications of this theory are really important, and they have a lot of different ways that we can attribute them, whether it's to physiology, pathology, diagnosis, acupuncture treatment, or dietary and herbal therapy. Now, how I'm going to explain or discuss the 5 elements over the next 5 evenings is going to be starting off with sort of the correspondences of the elements, or what they govern or regulate to in nature, what they're responsible for. I will then go over some of the signs and symptoms that can show up in you physically, mentally, or emotionally if that element is what we call out of balance inside of you, and then how we can treat it, whether it's through acupuncture or some at-home ways. First, however, I'm really excited because I'm going to introduce you to tonight's guest, Dr. Kachina Smith, a doctor of acupuncture, practicing in Maryland, as both a colleague and very good friend of mine. I'm inviting her on today to, 1, discuss what the year of the metal ox has in store for us, as well as to what it is that comes to her mind when she thinks about the element of the metal. So everyone, please welcome Dr. Kachina Smith.
Hi, thanks for having me on today.
Of course, welcome. So I think something fun, to kind of kick off today's video is what does the year of the metal ox have in store for us? I know a lot of people might not be familiar with the Chinese astrology, but a lot of people do say that every year one of the elements and the animals of the Chinese zodiac pairs together, and I guess you can say they have a fortune or something in store for us. So if you can go over that.
Sure. So with our Chinese Lunar New Year, this is the year of the metal ox. And first, we want to take a look at the ox itself. One of the primary foundations of understanding the Chinese 5 elements and the Chinese zodiac is that we're always looking for how it shows up naturally and how it shows up in nature interacting with it. So think about the ox itself. The ox, on a positive side, it is strong-willed and determined. It is definitely diligent about what it's doing. And when it has a goal in mind, it keeps going to complete that goal. Nothing can stop it. However, sometimes on a little more challenging side, it can also be extremely obstinate. So that is something for all of us to look for during this year when things get a little more tough than usual, which we already know we've been on that path since last year. And keep in mind that with the ox, that stubbornness can be turned into determination and positive goal setting and punching through those walls that are popping up in front of us, it seems like all the time with challenges. The ox also, if you think about it as well, is that it is a earth animal. It has to do with working with the earth. It always stays grounded. And that's extremely important for us this year. As for the metal element, each time that the animals do cycle through the Chinese zodiac, they're associated with one of the Chinese 5 elements. This year, the metal element is paired with it, and metal is about multitudes of things, but at its core, we're talking about inspiration and finding the gem when you're having trouble, especially in those times of challenge. So another way to think of this is that metal is about abundance, not necessarily just specifically to financial wealth, but also what's at the core of us. Our abundance starts within ourselves. And the best way to cultivate that is starting with gratitude for what you have. Even if you wake up in the morning and just give yourself a chance just to jot down maybe 3 things, 5 things, maybe even up to 10, what your sources of gratitude are, even if it's just as small as I woke up, I have money in my pocket, I drank water today. The more you experience internal gratitude, the more you will receive abundance. As for the metal element as well, aside from being just the shiny things, metal is a very light element. It's associated with the element of air. So as I said before, we're thinking about inspiration represented by the lungs in the body, that is the metal yin organ. And thinking about for yourself this year, when you take that deep breath in, what allows you to take that deep breath in? What keeps you breathing and going? Sometimes when we're struggling, you need to stop and be aware of your breathing. You can change your whole day just by slowing down and focusing within. And that's just a taste of some of what the metal element is about.
Fantastic. I hope you guys were listening. I think that's a lot of great advice for the, I guess the year 2020 is already here as of Friday. Thank you so much, Dr. Smith, for that great commentary on the year of the metal ox, as well as an introduction to the metal. I think now we're going to move on to the correspondences of the metal element. All right, guys. So as we just said, or we just heard, 2021 is the year of the metal ox. And so tonight we're going to talk about the metal element. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to start off with talking about some of the correspondences about the metal element. What are correspondences? Well, these are things that the metal element has a relationship with, things that it governs, things that it regulates. So things that when you think of, you're like, oh, okay, that's part of the metal element. For example, we say that the season of the metal is the fall or the autumn. The climate is dryness. The color is white. The taste is spicy or pungent. Direction is west. Some organs from the body that go with the metal element are the lungs, the yin organ, and the large intestine, the yang organ. Now remember this, the lungs and the large intestine, these are the organs of the metal element. So when we talk about physical signs and symptoms that can go out of balance, most of these are going to have to do with the lungs or the large intestine. The spirit of the element, as we might call it, is the Po, the corporeal soul, the human, the more physical body. Sound is that of a crying. We tend to say that the metal element person has kind of a weeping or a crying voice. Their voice kind of goes up and then down, kind of like a cry. The emotion is grief. The sense organ is the nose. We say that the metal element opens into the nose. The tissues or the skin. This means that we say that the metal element controls the skin. So again, some signs and symptoms might point to dermatological or skin conditions, and the energy is contracting or inwards. When we think about the fall or the autumn, everything's starting to go inwards. If you look at nature, the leaves are starting to fall, right? We tend to be more inside than we are outside. So some other things about the metal. The metal can be molded and hardened. It is about solidity, again, about moldability. Think of a blacksmith making these metal tools. Sometimes it's said that a metal personality is someone who is meticulous, honest, and responsible. Some say that those who are the metal element may be someone angular and tall. However, these are all about the correspondences of the metal element. How we're going to discuss them in a way that is applicable for you all is talking about how it shows up out of balance and treating that element out of balance. So as we might know from Western medicine, the lungs and the large intestine, which in Chinese medicine are the organs of the metal element, are responsible for taking in, right, the lungs and letting go the large intestine. So some signs and symptoms that our metal element is out of balance. We might have a feeling of chest constriction or chest tightness, breathlessness, shortness of breath, or easily out of breath. Someone who has maybe a history of asthma or a history of ear infections, or, some people tend to get bronchitis over and over, or pneumonia over and over again. So someone who, I guess it's easy for them to catch a cold. You think of someone who has chronic rhinitis, frequent sinus infections. Also someone who might have chronic skin conditions like dermatitis, eczema, or even psoriasis could have some things that are pointing to their metal element being out of balance. Someone who might need some work with their metal might also have constipation. They might have dry, brittle skin or hair. They could have excess sweating or lack thereof. There's that connection to the skin again. They might also tend to be a bit melancholy, right? Or they might not deal too well with grief. So if any of these look like some signs and symptoms you or someone you know has, you might want to get your metal element checked out. What do I mean by that? Well, you could go to see your primary care doctor and they can prescribe you some medications or some treatments based on your signs and symptoms. Or you can come see a licensed acupuncturist who will take these signs and symptoms in addition to some other diagnostic tools like looking at your tongue or taking your pulses and give you some treatment recommendations based on that. Now, what are some of these treatment recommendations? Well, if you come to an acupuncturist like myself or even Dr. Kachina Smith, one of the first things we do after we get a thorough intake is we'll do an acupuncture treatment. So there's some really good points that we would do for the lung and large intestine. The source points, basically the points that command the whole lung and large intestine meridians of the body, are large intestine 4 and lung 9. So some of these, you may not know what they are or where they are, and that's okay. But basically with these points for acupuncture is we would needle them. And when we needle them, we use a really fine, thin needle. And this insertion of the needle into what's known as the acupoint or acupuncture point causes this cascade of biophysiological reactions in the human body. So we put a point in one place, our nerve signals travel all the way up to the brain, and the brain starts this production and release of different neurotransmitters, chemicals, hormones, etc. And by putting them in different places, we're going to get different chemicals and hormones and everything produced. Some other things that we can do aside from acupuncture is you can do acupressure, and this is something that you can do at home. And so I just wanted to give you guys 4 different points to do at home. One is large intestine 4. Again, this is the source point of the large intestine channel. So any of those signs and symptoms that we went over earlier, pretty much if you have any of those or anything going on in your head or with your face, you can use this point. To find this point, you take your hand. Yes, it looks like I'm making a little puppet. You can find where your thumb and your pointer finger connect, and you can kind of just hop over. And when you press it, it should be tender. All right, kind of like this first picture in my upper left-hand corner shows. So what can large intestine 4 do for you? Again, it's useful for any diseases of the head and face. So it can be used for someone who's getting a cold or got a cold, right? This is one of the best points to do for someone who's sick. So if someone's got COVID, unfortunately, if someone just has a nasty cold, so they're experiencing headache, body ache, dizziness, congestion, swelling of the head or the eye area. Maybe they've got a congested nose or even a toothache, deafness, swelling of the face, facial paralysis, facial tics, basically, or even kind of an inability to speak. Large intestine 4. It's also really good if anyone has basically, well, any kind of pain or any kind of physiological reaction or something going on in the upper part, so the neck and up. And this point can also be used with another point known as liver 3 to really help to move what we call the chi of the body, but it's really good about regulating everything, getting that blood flowing in a really good way. So again, large intestine 4, pull your hand over from where the joints meet, tender, press on it for about 30 seconds, taking nice, slow, deep breaths. Another point that's really great to do for acupressure is CV17, conception vessel 17. And although this point is not on the lung or large intestine meridian, it's on something known as the conception vessel or the Ren Mai. This is a really great point for anything that has to do with respiratory symptoms. To find this point, you're basically going to go on the breastbone or the sternum right between your chest. And again, this is a point that if you press on will feel a little bit tender. This point is really good for helping to build what we call Wei Qi in Chinese medicine. You might call it immunity. So it's really good for asthma, pain, oppression of the chest tightness. It's also really good because the lungs are right next to the heart. It's good for cardiac pain, palpitations as well. It's also really good if you have any kind of what we call I guess like upset chi or chi going the wrong way. So hiccups, belching, acid reflux, those sorts of things. You press on this point on the breastbone or the sternum, and it helps everything open up and go the way it needs to go. So in terms of respiratory symptoms, I know I talked about chest tightness and asthma, but think about someone who might have some phlegm or mucus like in their chest. So like think of bronchitis or pneumonia. It's a really great point to needle. It's also a really great point to press on. I just want to show you guys here the elbow crook right here, large intestine 11. I call this point my fire engine point. It's really good for, putting out any kind of fire. So when I say fire, I mean kind of like infection or anything that's like a red or nasty. So you can think of maybe if someone has some nasty eczema or psoriasis in terms of a skin condition, right? Again, red and angry, or maybe they have a bacterial infection or a viral infection. It really helps to take that infection out. Finally, I have large intestine 20. This is the ending or the last point on the large intestine channel. I know that picture probably isn't the greatest, but if you push right here by the sides of your nose, this is large intestine 20. This is a really great point for helping to open up the sinuses, for getting phlegm and mucus in the nasal system moving. It's also really good for those who might have facial paralysis because of the muscles around the nose here. So again, if you have any signs and symptoms that we went over earlier, you can come to see an acupuncturist for some acupuncture. You can do some acupressure at home. Some other things you can do if you have congestion or you have an upper respiratory infection or something known as cupping or like gua sha or scraping of the neck and upper back. So this first picture here with the blue dots, that shows where we would place the cups. And then the picture of the child shows the cups actually on the person. So this is cups on the upper back. The cups create a suction and moves the blood vessels towards the surface of the skin, allowing for better blood flow. When there's better blood flow, when things are more open, we can get that mucus and that phlegm to clear, right? We know this is really important when someone has an upper respiratory infection. That, and in my opinion, the cupping and gua sha feel really good too. So some dietary recommendations for treating the metal element. So one of the things we might want to do is first and foremost, it's not on here, but the metal element, as I noted earlier, is associated with our immune system. So you want to eat foods that help to boost your immune system. Some other things you might want to do are to incorporate some lung strengthening foods, which are those that are white in color. Again, remember when we went over the correspondences, the color of the metals is white. So you can add in a few white things like Asian pears, cauliflower, almonds, radish, potatoes, turnips, parsnips, rutabaga, apples, rice and oats, sesame seeds, even onions and garlics. It should be noted that onions and garlics also have a dispersing effect, which, as you see here, are spicy or pungent. So if you have like a clogged nose, an infection, that sort of thing, it can help to disperse. However, if you've got like a dry cough or you're really dry skin, brittle hair, you should probably minimize the spicy foods and drinks and do more neutral foods as well. Some would say to eat fermented foods daily in order to optimize the intestinal flora for the immune health and your digestion health. So these can include things like sauerkraut. Some of you might have heard of kimchi or kombucha, kefir soda or kefir yogurt, those sorts of things like sour cream and even cottage cheese. Then again, though, in this case, while we want to say to watch the spicy foods if you're dry, if you tend to be really clogged up, you want to watch eating too much yogurt or too much dairy, because that can make you even more clogged and cause more mucus. And then again, when it comes to making the metal element or helping to strengthen the metal element, you want to eat foods that are natural or in season during autumn or the time of the fall. So even if it's not fall, eating the types of foods that are around in the autumn are really good for the metal element. In addition to dietary recommendations, there are also some lifestyle recommendations that you could do, or even a licensed acupuncturist would tell you how to do. So there's something known as Qigong. It is a type of exercise that comes from Chinese medicine. It is about conscious breath work, your consciousness, and then conscious and gentle movement. There are some that can be used for the lungs and the large intestine, or the signs and symptoms of the metal element that we went over with earlier. Deep breathing exercises that Dr. Kachina Smith actually talked about earlier are also really good for helping the metal element. Slow, deep breathing, maybe counting in to 7 and then exhaling to the count of 7 as well is really good. And meditation is also really good for helping the metal element get better. This is just to say that, yes, these sorts of things can be treated. In particular, this review has to talk about someone I was helping who was feeling under the weather. I actually did not only the acupuncture, but I did the scraping and the cupping on her neck and upper back. I was able to help release some of the mucus and phlegm that was caught in her chest, as well as release some muscular tension. So that really helped her feel better, get her on her feet a little quicker than she might have been otherwise. And then that kind of concludes tonight's talk. I know I went over a whole lot of information, but for anyone who's interested, I'm always around. Never hesitate to reach out to me or Dr. Smith with any questions about the metal element. And again, that's really, your respiratory system, your large intestine system, your immune system, as well as your skin. And like we did on Friday, we have a prize to give away for this evening. And this evening's prize is all about helping out that metal element, in particular that respiratory element. I know the cold and obviously the flu is still hanging around. So I've got a great doTERRA breath drops and doTERRA eucalyptus essential oil, as well as a Chinese herbal formula for coating your throat should you get a sore throat. And that kind of concludes my talking. So if we can take a second to go over and see who tonight's winner is going to be, that would be fantastic. All right, let's see what we have here. All right, looks like we have a winner for tonight's prize. Your lungs and respiratory system are going to be in great health. And with that, guys, that ends the discussion on the metal element. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to thank our special guest, Dr. Kachina Smith, for telling us about our year ahead, as well as some things that we can do for the metal element. In order to continue to be eligible for winning prizes, please make sure to check in with us tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking about the water element and how the water element can show up in us, how it can show up out of order or out of balance, and some of the things that we can do to restore it to health. And tomorrow, I'm going to have some case studies that I'm going to be talking about as well. And with that, guys, once again, thank you so much. I hope you guys are enjoying the start of your week. See you next time.